The comp plan related to wetlands and treatment of sanitary sewage. Randy?
All right, first of all, let me get this out there right now. I don't hate wetlands. I love wetlands. I love Wakulla Springs. I think wetlands need to be protected. I think they should be protected. My whole point of this is government redundancy. This is an environmental resource permit application from the Water Management District for wetlands. It covers isolated wetlands. It covers boat ramps. It covers docks. What I'd like to see us do is adopt this as our wetlands policy. That way, if Jamie finds somebody in violation of this, she goes out and then code enforcement gets them. And then the state, we'll follow the state regulations. You don't go get a Corps permit, then a state permit. I know they're joined together. And then, after you got your permit in your hand, you got to go get a county permit. I think the Water Management District knows a lot more about wetlands than our planning staff, no offense. And I think they're the proper oversight agency. We can enforce this rule the same way we can give somebody a speeding ticket on 319 for driving over 55, even though we didn't set the speed limit. We can enforce this rule. And I think this is a very comprehensive rule. And I didn't ask anybody here to support me. I don't have any slides. That's it. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see our comp plan. I went through and changed it. And I don't, personally, I don't think a comprehensive plan should have specifics, huh?
Have we got that?
Yes.
That's all this.
It's all together. I don't think, my personal opinion is a comprehensive plan should not have detailed qualifiers in it or restrictions. I think that is better left to code or ordinance. We have a wetlands ordinance. We can keep a wetlands ordinance without this comp plan language. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say I agree with our wetlands ordinance. I think we should adopt this as our wetlands ordinance. I think this does pretty much everything we need to do as long as we can enforce it if the state doesn't want to. If you think back to any of our prior wetlands issues we've had, like Tide Creek, this would have taken care of it. The thing with Panacea with Ronald Fred and Larry, the Corps, the rules changed about, I don't know, November, maybe somebody in the audience knows better than I do, but November 1, the Water Management District took jurisdiction over isolated wetlands. Prior to that, there was no jurisdictional body. And I think that was the main driver behind the county coming up with wetlands ordinance, was to close that gap. Now there is a jurisdictional agency for isolated wetlands. As far as I can see, the only thing that is exempted is an upland, a pond less than an acre, man-made pond on an upland that's less than an acre and a big is exempted. Everything else is covered. Now, what I had also suggested here, I'd like to see us keep all the setbacks as far as karst protection. I think they're, just real briefly here, just bear with me a second. For example, a setback from first and second magnitude springs is 300 feet. Spring runs 150 feet. Smaller springs 100 feet. Sinkholes with a direct connection to aquifer 100 feet. And other karst features with a direct connection to 100 feet. I don't want to mess with that at all. All I'm talking about is wetlands. And issues that come to mind are around my house. Mr. Harvey has a cow pasture with a little wet, low area in it. That would be jurisdictional from the Corps. He couldn't go in and destroy it, but our regulation says you got to stay 75 feet from it. And we just went through this on our horse arena. There's a tie-dye head out there, or around there. We couldn't make our parking lot because we had to stay 75 feet away from that wetland. And these people have jurisdiction over that wetland. If we wanted to mess with it, we'd have to go get a permit from them. That's my whole point. Is I'd like to see, and I can talk about the subject now, or we can let everybody else talk, and I'll talk about it next. But it's kind of along the same lines.
You want to talk about them both, so people can give feedback on both?
I'll be happy to talk about them both. And I understand wetlands are important. I really do.
Okay, well, let's let the citizens talk.
Okay.
And maybe you can answer
If it's
that.
about septic, they may want to wait till after I address that. I'll be very brief.
Okay. Catherine Gilbert, you have wetlands on your... Shoot.
We're talking about wetlands first, and Commissioner Merritt's statement, the proposed changes.
Catherine Gilbert, 338 White Oak Drive. If the county would like to modify its wetlands regulations to reduce the burden on property owners and businesses for situations where the county and state regulations overlap, I would be happy to help with that effort. However, I know of nowhere where a local government can take enforcement action on a state project when the state is not going to take that enforcement action. You're able to identify the areas, but the state has to follow through with the paperwork, and we have enforcement discretion.
Can I ask?
But it's a good
attitude.
attitude. A good attitude.
Mr. Chairman, did it might
This is my
resolve?
3 minutes.
Let her
answered his
finish
question
and just
instead
note
of
your
my 3
questions and
minutes.
then go ahead, ma'am.
Could you pull the microphone
Oh, I'm
down a
sorry.
little bit? Thank
To
you.
get into what I wanted to say, I wasn't going to talk about the fact that the 25-foot buffer the state have is politically directed and incredibly inadequate. You can find all of that on Google. There are other counties that have very strong, large buffers, such as Franklin County right next door, 150 feet. And then it has things you can do and can't do within it. Everywhere I look in Wakulla, if someone wants to make everything look neat, cutting down the forests, putting in lawns, trimming, mowing, totally lowering the biodiversity that God gave us to support our food webs, which are really life webs, and their health, how they function, is dependent upon how we treat our environment. It isn't only about the wetlands, but they're at the bottom of the hill receiving our garbage, and they're at the bottom of the hill supporting the food webs that support us and support the wildlife we enjoy here. Some of you say this ordinance is taking your property. Has it ever occurred to you that when we mismanage our land, we are taking the biodiversity that God gave us to support our populations? Consider the shore of a stream. Shores are generally nursery areas, but someone wants a dock, someone wants a gazebo, someone wants more lawn. Each person takes some. The taking is from what God has given us to survive within our means. The taking isn't just monetary. It's maintaining the species and habitat God gave us that allows us to survive and enjoy the planet. God doesn't make things in neat little rows. Things are uneven for multiple purposes, like a forest. Different parts of the forest are used by different creatures. Some creatures use all of it. Some just need the very, very tops of the trees that people want to trim off because they're sticking out. Everything God did has a purpose, and I don't ever hear that coming into this discussion. We're supposed to be stewards of the land, managing it to support us. However, God didn't leave a book for us to read on how to do that. Just simple instructions that we must manage it, and He gave us brains. But there's so much for us to learn, so He gave us all different brains and made us social animals to work together. Yes, we are animals, and I'd like to see us putting that kind of into this concept. I understand that you feel that the current ordinance went too far. We can work on that. But the state has a half-acre threshold, and those little isolated wetlands that support creatures that can't live with fish, they are very, very important to us. So please take that into consideration.
Randy, do you want to comment to that or no?
I didn't see the half-acre threshold in here. I may have missed it. I'll take your word for it. My thought was to incorporate this by reference. That way no matter what the state did, we can enforce it. This is ours also. That was my idea. Because I understand, I talked to Jack Rudlow at length about this. His concern was that, well, what if there's a problem? We called the state before they haven't enforced it. And in fact, I met with Vic and Howard and we talked about this. If we adopted this as our ordinance, then we could enforce it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're pointing to this, and I haven't had a chance to read all of your...
From Water Management District.
Again, the ER permit has its limits, and the Environmental Resource Permitting Program in Northwest Florida is the least restrictive. We were directed statutorily to do that, to even get it in 16 years after the rest of the state had it. Politics are important. It brings us all to the table to talk, but sometimes the science and the fact that things are here for a purpose gets left out of the discussion. But like I said, I'd be happy to work with anyone if they wish to.
Yeah, I also, Randy, on page where it says 10.4, at the very top, it says compliance will not be required for regulated activities, which I wasn't sure even what all the regulated activities were, in isolated wetlands less than 1/2 acre in size, unless, and then it's it has to either have endangered or threatened species in it, or, you have to reach a really high threshold for something that's less than 1/2 acre to be protected.
Well,
and our ordinance...
I may disagree with everyone on this, but that's just fine with me, that threshold is. I know everybody doesn't agree with that.
Okay, but our ordinance, what did we set? Was it 1,000 or 500?
Well, I forget exactly, but we are really knocking out the bottom of our food webs. I don't remember the particulars. I really haven't been myself lately, so I didn't come here with all of my facts lined up.
Because we did eliminate really small, whether it was 500 or
Mr.
that
Lamb.
summer...
It might have been, excuse me?
500.
500 square feet?
A
Okay.
1/2 acre is quite a good size for the amphibian populations that we're wiping
I'm not
out.
going to... Lynn, what page were you looking at? Or
10.
somebody else can go ahead. I'll just... Let me
AH Volume 1, 10-4.
Very top paragraph.
Yeah. I guess I want to make sure I understand very clearly what this will and won't protect compared to what we currently have in place. And that one, I saw that one difference. But Catherine, are there some others that you're aware of, that big differences between this versus what protection we currently have?
Well, basically, the state's always been told to try and get local governments to obtain delegation of the environmental resource permitting program, because that would give you, and I kind of disagree with you, I think you have darn good staff over there, and I think they know this county better than the water management folks who are from all over the state, and they are great folks. I've worked with quite a few of them.
I'm not saying
So,
anything about them. Don't
the
put
point
words
is
in my
that,
mouth.
that
Just
the
say they're not
statutes...
expert wetland delineators.
Okay, the statutes direct us to try to get you guys to take over this program because you have more people, you have more knowledge, you have more ability to get the job done, and local ordinances usually go below the 5-acre threshold and protect everything they can. In Hillsborough County, 25% of their isolated wetlands are below that threshold.
So the main differences I understand are that 1/2 acre and the size of the buffers.
Yes, the size of the buffers,
75-foot
25 is ridiculous.
Those are the two. That's what we would be losing, that we currently protect.
And a bunch of bureaucracy, and a bunch of lawsuits, and having to go get multiple permits for the same activity. That's also part of the equation. I'm not anti-wetlands. I'm just trying to make this thing simple. Use state regulations.
God's watching.
That's all I'm
Okay,
saying.
let's move on here. David Damon?
David Damon, Crawfordville. Mr. Merritt, you say you're not anti-wetlands, but what you're taking out of the local, the teeth that is written in to protect it, you're eliminating, and it's not redundant. Our local ordinance is much stricter with setbacks, and I'm just here to say this county wants to talk about ecotourism, and I keep hearing that, and they want to talk about protecting the natural environment, and this is what we want to encourage, and we hear about the green guides, and we hear about all this, and then you turn around and you're eliminating the wetlands, which are so critical to all of that. And I think the board and the county needs to figure out what direction they want to go. Are they here to protect the environment and they are here to encourage that kind of ecotourism, or are we here just to develop every little bit of wetlands and chop it all up into little building plots and cram as much in as we can? Because this clearly is about development and seeing how much you can cram into a small area and use every bit of the wetlands. This is not, we're not talking about some little wet area in somebody's cow pasture here. We're talking about large expanses that will be opened up for development that cannot be because of this.
Can you explain that to me? What large areas are going to be open for development? I don't understand.
Well, there's going to be there's a lot of land that was just sold in Panacea. There's a lot at Shell Point that cannot be developed because of the setbacks we have locally, because of these. And what's going to happen is it's going to open up a lot of that shouldn't be opened up, because we need to protect these wetlands. I mean, there's a reason for the wetlands, and clearly by all this that I'm seeing crossed out here, you're not protecting the wetlands as good as we could. And that's all I'm saying. I agree with the lady back here. She said it very well. We need to pay attention. We need to decide what direction we want to go as a county and what's important to us. And this is not redundant.
Can you give me, please, a specific example of what you're talking about large areas of land will be open for development that couldn't be done now?
I
That the
think
state would not, the water management district would not regulate.
what I'm talking about is there'll be, a large tract, and I can look some up and let you know, but there'll be a large tract that has a lot of buffering wetlands. And what this does, it enables more lots to be divided. I'm talking about in general. It allows more of it to be developed, and that's what's going to happen. Because of setbacks, yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sue has one as an example.
Okay, if we're going to talk, you need to fill out a card and come up here, but are you through,
I
sir?
just heard her say that in the
Okay.
background. That's all.
Ron Pasecki?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ron Pisecki. Randy, you say let the Northwest Water Management District handle this. Do we really know who they are? It's another bureaucratic organization that's got a board of 12 to 15 people, all political appointees by the governor, of which, as the last I'd looked at, there are none from Wakulla County, and I think only one from Tallahassee. So do we want political decisions telling us how to manage the natural resources in Wakulla County? I don't think so. Water is critical to the day-to-day life in the county. Water is critical to everything that David just said: ecotourism, development, quality of life, fishing resources, and everything. I honestly prefer that we use the expertise locally to better manage our facilities than DEP. Now, right now, DEP is backing off of a lot of things, and you're not able to get a lot of things that you would like to see here done through the bureaucracy of DEP. So from that standpoint, I'm much more comfortable having our folks here make these decisions along with the board than letting a political group do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vic Lambu?
Vic Lambu. You need to consider what the wetlands mean to the economy. Our seafood industry is dependent upon it. Our fishing industry, both sport and commercial, the tourism, the ecotourism, and our restaurants that bring people down here. Also the quality of life that we enjoy here. People move down here and use it as a bedroom community, and they don't like traveling on 319, but they could live up further north and not have to go through the roads. So there's a reason for it. But if you don't believe that, and if you all want to turn it into a Broadway like New York Street or a Wall Street, then forget everything I'm about to say. Because we don't need the wetlands for that. Now we're talking about the Northwest Water Management District. We're going to rely on them to protect them. Well, my understanding right now is that the Northwest Water Management District only has enough money to continue doing that program this year, and there's some very active talk with the governor's office about giving the program back to DEP. So there may not be any Northwest Water Management District, most likely under the present budget, to do this. Also talk about taking away the isolated wetlands, so they won't be protected if that occurs. And I think there's a very excellent chance that will occur. So what are we accomplishing here by doing that? We are putting up our wetlands for grab. We are relying on other people that's not going to be there, most likely. And one of the things I don't understand, you say, you know, it's hard. In the part that you're scratching out, I'd like to read. The Wakulla County Board of County Commission may establish a variance procedure that grants reasonable use of residential and non-residential properties in relation to the buffer. Now, you can give references. I mean, you can give variances, and you all have given variances before. So if you want to change the ordinance, that's something different. But here is you basically saying, let's get rid of the wetlands program. That's how I perceive it, and I think that's how the public perceives it. Thank you.
Hugh Taylor?
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm speaking, I guess, as a frustrated citizen and a frustrated member of the Wetlands Committee. We spent, goodness, 9 months with all kinds of scientific, legal, anecdotal, situational examples, and you have a thing you are proposing just like that, no rhyme or reason. And I heard the tell me what great wetlands areas will not be usable. That's kind of sprung. The next time this is brought up, I bet there will be 6 or 3 or 9 or 12 minutes worth of specific areas in this county that will, by your little political, snap of your fingers, will be available for development. And have we not learned 2 things? Have we not learned BP, the oil spill, Katrina, Dennis? Have we not learned the value and the efficacy of wetlands? I would maintain there's a lot of popular sentiment now because of those 3 events. The other side of that coin is, I mean, the community center thing was great. That presents an opportunity for this county to jump in and do stuff, and everybody was pulling for it. Wetlands, the bottom line of wetlands is water, and water is the new oil. Water is blue gold. Any reasonable research shows the scarcity of water. Why do we have out-of-town interests just slavering to get up here? Not because they love our pine trees and our Walmart, because they want our water. And you want to see, why? It's so valuable. Think of the economic model that's based on water instead of subdivision. Smaller and smaller lots and higher densities. But to sum up, you can't have it both ways. You can't love them and present what you're presenting. Please just, let's keep it as it is. Work on it. Work on the individual elements that everyone's concerned with. Thank you.
Chuck Hess?
Mr. Chairman, real quick, I'd like to just say again that nothing that I'm wanting to do would allow anyone to go mess with any wetlands that were affected by BT or Katrina or whatever. You can't go out. The state will not allow you to go out and start dredging wetlands, no matter what we say. And we have control over PUDs and plats. If we want somebody to set aside extra buffers for wetlands, we can do that.
No, you'll get in a taking situation, I think, if you try to start doing that with your ordinance doesn't already have it cleared. So I wouldn't go that route, okay? Very quickly, I mean, I could talk about a lot of the things, you know, about the importance of these small isolated wetlands. And I could talk about, you know, how you want to turn over management of this to a state agency that really doesn't give a rat's ass about most anything. You know, if you look at almost every spring in Florida, they're all polluted, okay, but our state water management agencies haven't done anything about protecting them. So, you know, that's the kind of a situation you're dealing with. And I think it comes all down to the basically, Mr. Merritt, you went to the basic school of Adam Smith, that the invisible hand will take care of everything. And the invisible hand of the market is just the way to do it. But you forgot the rest of the education, which was Garrett Hardin's basic principle, the tragedy of the commons. And if we don't regulate activities, basically the individual will take the profit and the public as a whole will pay the cost. And that's what this is about. The individual that owns that property will get all the profits, get all the advantages of having that house right on the beach or whatever, you know, whatever wetlands we're talking about, where the public at large has to pay the cost. And that is the concept you're missing in your whole proposal here. Thank you.
And Ralph Thomas?
Ralph Thomas, 637 Hunters Trace. I have to have a vote for smaller government. If it's covered by another ordinance, then we need to use that. He's not advocating turning it over to the state for enforcement. He's saying we adopt it. And he and I didn't speak about this ahead of time, but I agree with what he's saying. If we adopt the ordinance, then we also adopt the authority to enforce it. I've only heard one thing brought up that they don't overlap, and I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but I think that's what we need to look at. If it is already covered, if we do have enforcement authority by adopting the ordinance, why do we need an additional layer of bureaucracy? I mean, it's just, we choke the system down. It's real easy to get caught up in the passion, and I applaud everyone's passion, and I enjoy the wetlands and would fight to protect it as much as anyone, but we've got to get to real facts and not just the passion. We can't let this issue be this group wants to protect the wetlands and this group wants to harm the wetlands. I never hear anyone bringing anything forward and said that's an offending source right there and you're polluting the wetlands. That this law, the difference between the 500 square feet or the half acre, I don't see any specific examples where we say that would be an offending source if we follow this action. So yes, definitely let's protect the wetlands, but we don't need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 additional layers of government in order to do that. We need to be responsible, but we need to do it in the most efficient means necessary. And it seems to me this would do it. Let's look further at the items that may not be protected by the state, and if we need to tighten those areas, let's tighten those areas, but we don't need to, it's feel-good legislation when we put legislation on top of additional legislation. So let's make it effective. Let's not make it big and cumbersome. Thank you.
Gail Hickman?
Mr. Moore, you own 100 acres of wetlands in a single parcel that you purchased. You purchased 359 acres, 100 acres are wetlands. I believe you should recuse yourself from voting on this issue in all fairness.
W.D. Lansford? Workshop.
Thank you, Commissioners. I was not a member of the Wetland Committee. However, I attended most every meeting, listened to them, offered suggestions, offered comments. And my sum total of the wetland ordinance was that it was too detailed, too involved, and too subject to misinterpretation. Well, let me tell you a little story. A couple of years ago, I had a client that wanted a dock built. So I designed, drew it up, did all the calculations and everything, and submitted it through the proper authorities, and in a couple of days we had our permit. Well, the first of this year, I had a client that came by and wanted me to design him a floating dock to replace one that got destroyed. So I sat down and over a period of time worked out a floating dock and a ramp and the access to it and all of this sort of thing. Detail after detail in about 5 or 6 pages. Small pages, 8.5 by 11, like they wanted up at the planning department, building department. So then he took it and made up a little pack. We made a packet with the photographs and drawings and so forth, and he submitted it to the Corps of Engineers, to the state, and to DEP. Passed all of them, stamped, nice, pretty little stamps. Came back and went to the planning department. Folks, that's where it got to be fun. They kicked it back and said, whoa, you don't have the gaps shown between the boards on the decking, and you don't have the size of the boards. Well, why is that required? Well, because the wetland ordinance says that you will have a ½ inch gap between the boards, and the boards will not exceed 8 inches in width. Okay. Now keep in mind that this was done at a seawall in a dredged channel over at Shell Point, where there was nothing but mud, and I mean mud, on the other side of the seawall. Well, there's no wetland there, but it is covered in our wetland ordinance. So I made the corrections and sent it back. They kicked it back again. Whoa, what's going on here now? Well, you don't have enough dimensions on there that we can actually tell what was there. So anyway, over the 5 or 6 pages, all of the dimensions were there. It was just a matter of getting them. Sent it again. Kicked back again for the 3rd time. Why? Because they wanted to know the distance across the dredged canal to ensure that we did not take up more than 1/4 of the distance across.
Mr. Lansbury, can you bring it to a close?
I'm bringing it to a close right now.
Okay.
I think that it is way too detailed, and it is subject to interpretation, just like this. There was no wetland there, but I had to comply with all of the wetland ordinance provisions for that particular project. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Dancy?
Well, thank you for letting me speak for a minute. If I offend anyone, I apologize in advance. But the truth is the truth, and it just has to be heard. Randy, I agree. I like well, actually, I disagree with what you're doing. Because if you implement this, then you're going to have interpretation of the county. That's what we had with the last ordinances. The ordinance might have been fine, but it's how they interpreted it. It caused all the lawsuits. If you do this, and then they interpret it differently than the state does, and then there's going to be a lawsuit because the state says they're not going to prosecute it, but the county is, and it's word for word the same. So that's my concern with doing this. I just don't think we need one at all. The North Florida water management will be fine. I think they have Florida's wetlands in mind. I will tell you this, when the state is on the side of most of the people that's spoken, then they're God. When they're not, well, they don't matter and they won't do nothing. Now, here's what I talk about the truth. 80% of this county, they have. These people already have 80% of this county. We got a little place to live here. And they want to regulate that to death and layers of government. What they are proposing is just flat wrong for the county. They have, go build trails, do whatever you want. You got the whole coastline except for St. Mark's, Panacea, and the Shell Point area. And basically you might have one boat ramp somewhere. They have the whole refuge. They can do whatever they want. They can go walking in, whatever you want to do. You got all the wetlands that nobody ever talks about. There's 500,000 acres of national forest over here. You do whatever you want to do out there. I don't care. Then they're assuming we're going to take a dump truck the first day you get rid of this, apparently, and go and start filling all our wetlands. But that's not the case. I'm not going to go fill wetlands. I like them. I got no problem with them. It doesn't make any sense. It costs too much to develop in them. Why doesn't anybody ever think of what reality is rather than just what they're going to do, what all the developers are going to do? They're not going to develop in the wetlands. It doesn't make any sense. You need them because if you're going to sell something, and they know I'm a realtor, if you're going to sell something, you want to sell it on wetlands or water. That's the draw. The other thing is, there's a lot of people here tonight that speak on the other side of this. But there's not that many people in the county that believe with them. And I can tell you why. 2 commissioners just won elections running on this very subject openly. And they overwhelmingly won. The people of the county are tired of regulations. People of the county, half the people of the county, they live here. So guess what? They won't bother their wetlands. Of the few people that live here that will bother their wetlands, if they want to call it that, you're still down to 5% that's going to be even closely encroached on. So thank you for letting me speak. I'm sorry I went over my time.
Thank you. Sue Damon?
Sue Damon, thank you, Commissioners. And Bob Danzy, Olive Shell Point is a wetland. There seems to be a lack of understanding about the importance of the wetlands. And until we can understand the importance, there's going to be a reluctance or at least very little incentive to protect them. Some see wetlands as an obstacle for development. Our existing wetlands ordinance with a 75-foot setback helps to protect our drinking water, our beaches from erosion, our properties from flooding, keeps wildlife nesting and living here, encourages tourism, hunting, fishing. Many animals and plants depend on wetlands for survival. Most commercial and game fish breed and raise their young in Wakulla's coastal marshes, and more than 1/3 of the United States threatened and endangered species live only in wetlands, and nearly half use wetlands at some point in their lives. In a world where water resources are more precious than ever, wetlands serve a vital function. Wetlands filter surface and groundwater and slow soil and pollutant runoff to help keep our springs and even our well water clean and pure. When we destroy the wetlands, we lose our clean water. Today I spoke with Lee Marcham, Chief of the Bureau of Environmental Resource Regulation with the Northwest Florida Water Management District, and he said there aren't really any requirements for a wetland buffer in state or federal regulations, and if you move forward, one could build right up to the wetland line. It's right there, right up to the wetland line. When we discussed Commissioner Merritt's plan, Marchman said that it is a reasonable assumption that if we follow Merritt's plan, that we will reduce the protection of our wetlands. The Bureau of Environmental Resource Regulations relies heavily on local county ordinances being more restrictive than the Bureau's own rules. So they're asking you to be more restrictive than what you're looking at there. Bay County, Franklin, Leon, Washington, Escambia, Walton counties are just a few counties that have more restrictive wetland setbacks. Markman also, well, and we both voiced the same question, why does Wakulla County have to be less restrictive when we can be more proactive to save our wetlands? Do our leaders even understand the importance of wetlands, the very basics? This should not even be a topic of conversation. We have a good wetlands ordinance now. It is a known fact that it is important to protect our wetlands, and some of you commissioners are ignoring the facts, and you're turning a blind eye on this. And the only thing I can ask is why? Why would you hurt your families? Why would you hurt the citizens in this county and future generations? If you do this, you're opening the door for a small group of people, investors, developers, builders, rich landowners, to profit and destroy habitat that is important to everyone. And one would have to ask, whose agenda are you really serving?
My position still stands, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay,
My position I'm serving is my own.
I understand. Okay, any comments?
I have questions for the attorney.
Basically, I just ran a race for this position. I ran it on less rules and regulations. I ran it on reducing the wetland ordinance that had been put upon us. I stand by that. I stand by Randy.
County Attorney in Senosa. We've had the 75-foot buffer in our comp plan since the 90s. 80s? I think it's just the 90s. Since 95, so almost 20 years. Does that, and that gives us a certain amount of protection, especially when taking arguments start to happen, because it's an existing law, and if you change it, that might actually start to cause more problems.
That's not one of my points, but I get you.
I'm talking about why I'm probably not.
Can I say one thing about that real quick, if you don't mind? Lindsay, if I'm not wrong, the last year we did, which was when, 2000, you and I talked about this, it specifically excluded swamps, bogs, and something else. Remember, Melissa, you and I talked about this? We looked at the comp plan from 1 year till the year was submitted, which is the evaluation and appraisal report. That language was taken out, excluded.
I can't hear you.
That language was taken out. So, as recently as a couple of years ago, the comp plan excluded, and it said, it specifically excludes, I talked to somebody about it. Anybody? Melissa? Anybody? We pulled out the old 2001 edition of the comp plan, we put out the new one, and it changed. So, you can check, you can verify on your own, but the most recent year changed the comp plan exclusion from isolated wetlands.
And DCA will have to approve any changes that are, I'm talking. Someone shook their head behind you and I got distracted. DCA still has to approve changes or no longer to comp plan?
They review, but they don't comment. Is that how? They review, they'll comment on items of state, state significance.
Could you repeat that to the mic?
Under the newest growth management, you can submit comp plan amendments at any time. You're no longer limited to 2 per year. They will review them, but they will only comment on issues that have regional or state importance.
Okay.
It's sort of the process for how that's going to work under the new growth management legislation is still sort of developing.
I'm not sure what Randy's goal is going to be for this evening, but I'm more than likely I probably won't end up supporting it one way or the other. Major comp plan changes, but I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward with only having the proposal for a day, one way or the other. I know that it's in here giving staff direction and having it followed up at the next meeting, so we wouldn't have to give them further direction.
Let me clarify myself a little more, if you don't mind. We have a wetlands ordinance. Some people had expressed some concern about what I'm doing adopting this. We cannot change our wetlands ordinance because our comp plan says this is what it has to be. I want to take it out of the comp plan. This is the same thing I'm going to do, or want to do, on septic rather. Take these 10 milligrams, all these specifics out of a comp plan, put them into code. Now maybe we'll adopt this as our code. Maybe we'll make some changes to it, make it stronger, or add it. We don't have that flexibility right now because it's in our comp plan. My goal is to take it out of the comp plan, take it out of DCA's hands, okay, and put it in our hands. We can change our ordinance as we see fit. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the state regulations are strong enough. Other people don't agree. That's another subject for another day.
And I understand, and that's a conversation we'll have. I don't fully understand everything that's in here to understand the differences. So I need more time to decide and make sure and talk to people.
I understand.
Help me understand. I'm not a wetlands expert.
In 1995, Burt Harris Private Property Rights Protection Act. That's a law. Burt Harris Private Property Rights Protection Act. That protects people who own property. It's a property right of your protection. Its purpose was to compensate property that was adversely impacted by government action that did not rise to a taking. There are various kinds of, we talk about taking, but there's other types of taking that doesn't go all the way level, all the way up to a taking. But it comes out that if there's an ordinance that inordinately burdens the existing use, that is a direct restriction on limits or use of real property, or that prevents an owner from permanently attaining reasonable investment-backed expectation for existing use or vested right for special use. Now, this inordinate burden does not include an ordinance maybe that has a temporary impact. It doesn't include something that has for remediation of a public nuisance. Or it doesn't affect where that the property owner and the government has reached an agreement for that, let's call it a partial taking. But as we said here tonight, not almost, everybody in the county who has agricultural property, who should change that to some other zoning, has a right under the Burt Harris Act to claim damages. Am I somewhat correct? Am I all the way correct?
The key phrase I think you need to focus on is reasonable investment-backed expectation, and if there has been a comp plan with a 75-foot buffer on the book since 1995, a court's going to look at that and say, is there a reasonable investment-backed expectation when you've been limited for decades?
And anyone who bought their property after 1995, I mean, if you
with that in.
knew that they would have a 75-foot buffer around the wetlands.
I think I somewhat disagree, because in the wording, and I have it here, but it's too long. You have 1 year from the time you change your zoning from agricultural to whatever to file a claim. In other words, if we have a wetlands ordinance on our book, and I decide that I want to use my property other than agriculture, then I can file a claim against this subliminal taking.
Mm-hmm.
And if you lose the claim, you've got to pay me for the property, you've got to pay my legal fees and the fees of the other attorney.
Right, but that claim ended in 1996.
I don't think so.
Because the comp plan had, our ordinance did actually, and this is not the argument here, and we can't talk outside of here, but yeah, I would talk to the county attorney more, because what our ordinance did actually gives people more permission of what they can do in that 75-foot buffer than what our comp plan does. It makes it more lenient.
Let me be clear about
something
something
else. We're not talking about the ordinance right now.
I wouldn't necessarily be adverse to adding stricter requirements in this to protect high-quality wetlands like, estuaries, pristine hardwood forests, pine forests around coastal areas. That's really not the point of this. I mean, I know that's the background discussion. The point is these rules are in our comp plan. We can't change them if we want to. DCA has to approve everything we do. I suggest we get them out. We deal with this on our own code. Same exact thing with septic tanks. It's the same argument. That's the base argument, is that it's in the comp plan. I'd like to see it addressed with code.
Well, I'm pretty comfortable with the language that's been in the comp plan. And I think we had a very knowledgeable group worked long and hard to develop what I think is a very balanced wetlands ordinance that again, I think is a valuable addition to what we have in the county. And there are opportunities with conditional use and variances to accommodate people who are having difficulty using their property because of some of what the restrictions. So I guess I probably would rather not spend time going back and trying to redo or undo. I'd rather move forward on some of our other, I mean, we got lots of problems in this county. I'd like to move forward on our stormwater issues and
I didn't
whatever.
like this the day it was brought up. I mean, I very rarely spoke at board meetings back in my job, but this is one of the items I got up and spoke about. And I'm not hiding the fact that I think our wetlands ordinance is too restrictive. Now, I think there are some good parts of it, but the comp plan with these buffer zones, that's what the ordinance has to say. That's my whole issue, is that it's in the comp plan. I want to take it out of the comp plan.
And I know we're about probably to change the septic tanks, or we may already have your point.
That's exactly my point.
I just want to reiterate again, well, my statement's been consistent, and I'll say it again. If there's a specific change to the wetlands ordinance that someone has that they have a problem with, I'm glad to discuss specific changes to the wetlands ordinance. I'm not really inclined to change the comp plan very much, and I think that, and after tonight's meeting, I will talk and look over things and talk with the county attorney, and but I think that we're protected. I think a lot of what we do is protected because we did it in '95. I think if we make a major change, all of a sudden we've changed things, and Wakulla County is no longer protected, and then we do become, everything Jerry's talking about happens. People have a year
Alan,
to
if we
argue
wanted to
takings.
change the setback around a farm pond from 75 feet to 50 feet, we
Right.
couldn't do it. We can't do it because the comp plan says it's got to be 75, period, everywhere. We don't care where you're at.
Okay.
That's my point.
But and I think, it's the way you do the use of it has been, they've made changes, and we can make a change in the ordinance that says if you want to put,
You cannot be less restrictive than the comp.
you can have a buffer, but you can say in the buffer around a farm pond, which I don't know is a legal classification, but they could make it one. So, you can do, there's a 75-foot buffer, and you can build a nuclear plant. I mean, you can put anything in the buffer, it just exists.
No, because I went through this on a mosquito pond on a commercial building.
You'd have to change the ordinance. You can still change the ordinance.
The ordinance cannot be less restrictive than the comp plan, period.
Could I get clarification from the planning staff on?
Well, in the situation...
Hold on, come on up here. Come on.
Okay. In the situation, Commissioner Merritt, that you're talking about with the stormwater pond at the commercial property, that was done under the old wetlands ordinance, which did not allow for commercial uses to receive variances. So that one went negatively for that reason.
And why I had to do a variance, pay for a variance, then and come before the board.
It was under the old ordinance, which is drafted much differently than what the new ordinance is. The new ordinance actually allows for commercial and residential variances.
Variance inherently, to me, means political. If you don't want it there, you vote against it. If you do want it there, you vote for it. I mean, I'm just trying to make it simple. I mean, ask anybody out there in the world that's neighbors or whatever, they all think it's too restrictive.
Heather, what I was saying earlier about defining the buffer for specific things, it can be different. Can it be fairly permissive if you define it that way?
And a buffer means a buffer to me.
I mean, you have two buffers. You have your 35-foot where your comp plan says that it's basically a no-touch zone. So that's pretty clear language in your comp plan. With the remainder, the wetlands ordinance has tried to allow for reasonable uses, and I think that is basically what you would aim for, is reasonable uses. Docks, boardwalks, things like that, so that people can access and enjoy the wetlands, but not adversely impact
Mowing
them.
grass when 75 feet of wetland.
Which is that lawsuit.
Okay, are we through talking this one out? Ready to move on to septics?
My septic point is exactly the same point. The language in the comp plan is too specific for a comprehensive plan. This 10 milligrams per liter, we need to address that via ordinance. We left ourselves absolutely no flexibility. There's going to be a study coming out, and Pat may speak to this, I'm certainly not going to ask him to, but there's going to be a study coming out recommending ways to protect Wakulla Springs. These areas, maybe you need this treatment of nitrogen, but a performance-based treatment system in Smith Creek does not help Wakulla Springs. When I spoke to Pat about this, their main concern is proximity to a water body. We may say, well, if you're within 200 feet of a water body, you've got to have performance-based. We can't do that right now. We can't do that because our comp plan says everybody's got to have one. That language does not belong in the comp plan. In my opinion, it should be addressed by ordinance.
I agree.
Just like this. Same point. Same exact point.
But I guess I may be more open. I may be more open to looking at the ordinance related to the performance-based septic tanks. Although, partly because I am disappointed.
Well, there actually is
treatment of effectiveness, and I think probably more would like to see us moving more toward cluster systems and so forth.
We have to
in areas.
There is no septic tank ordinance. There is no performance-based septic tank ordinance.
We'd have to change our comp plan.
It's only in the comp plan.
But we had it done. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That's the only place.
Ms. Starks, if we do this, I'd recommend we start forming a septic tank ordinance. Certainly. I mean, I don't want to just cut it off and say no more performance-based, but we need to get rid of it out of the comp plan and make an ordinance that addresses it.
I'll agree with you on the second one. I think the second one gets too specific, and more so than the first one, which just talks about buffers. Is not your main complaint right now that I've taken away from it.
Can we have one citizen to speak on this, Bob Danzy?
I think most of us
hold on.
wanted to speak on the second.
Okay.
I would go ahead and agree that with what Randy's talking about doing. I don't know about creating another ordinance. I'm just not for layers of government. I'm just not going to be. I never have been. But it's something I may be telling you that you already know, or maybe not. There is no DCA anymore. The Governor Scott signed a bill, made it law, June 2nd, that abolished DCA. Put it, what's left of it, under a different cabinet, I guess, a different person. You can do whatever you want in our comp plan now. You don't have to ask them. You only have to send them a complete record of what you did. So if you want to make these changes in the comp plan, it's not submitting and waiting. Pretty much the buck stops here. You have to send them a copy. You have to check what I'm saying if you don't know about it, or maybe I've got some of my facts wrong. But I've done a little work on that, and I think I'm pretty close. Thank you.
Mr. Paseki?
Yes, I think a lot of people filled out cards and wanted to speak on both issues. Randy, I'm going to agree with you in one point. We do not have performance-based septic systems that can meet that standard that's in the comp plan. And that should not be there. So I would agree with that one point. However, the requirement to have performance-based septic systems throughout the whole county was not put in there just to protect Wakulla Springs. The person pushing that the most was Commissioner Bremner back when he was there. I've got a copy of a study at home that was done by the University of South Florida. And they put testing devices from Sopchoppy all the way around Mashes Sands to Shell Point. That showed in rainy weather, they were picking up fecal material in high levels of nitrates and all those testing points because of septic systems, standard septic systems. Shell Point, Acker Labs in Tallahassee does all the water treatments. I know Todd Acker very well. He told me the same thing. In wet weather, they pick up fecal material from the beach. Dry weather, it's more avian from birds, pelicans, seagulls, and whatever. The city of Tallahassee, through lawsuits and whatever, has reached the settlement agreement. The biggest problem on Wakulla Springs had been nitrates coming from the spray field. They're doing wonders to address that problem. The remaining area that's still the major problem is septic systems. And there are regional studies being made. And I think you're all aware the Wakulla Basin Working Group is working on a springs restoration plan. And they've got a draft of that up at DEP. Got a note from Bob Knight today saying hopefully they'll be able to get us the draft of that next week, and that's sort of the first step of what needs to be done. But I would not support getting rid of performance-based septic systems until, and I would offer this as president of the Friends. We've got tremendous scientists here in the region. We would be more than welcome to host another workshop at Wakulla Springs where we invite the other governments to join, and we'll bring in the Todd Kincaids, the Rodney DeHaans, the Hal Davis, your scientists in this area that know the science behind water and what impacts it. And if after all of that it's still concluded that there's areas in Wakulla County that aren't vulnerable to this, that could live with standard septic systems, then I'd be a strong supporter with you to say let's delineate those areas. But I think we all need to get the scientists to give us an education. Thank you.
Chuck, yes?
Well, I do like the idea of a performance-based septic system. I'm not sure it has to be in the comp plan because there are areas where it might not be necessary. However, you have a study coming out. Let's find out the results of the study. But I think whatever we do, we need to go ahead and move forward with the ordinance, because we need to have the biggest problem you have for all these systems is when they fail. And if we don't have somebody out and have some way to inspect them and make sure that they're working properly, then they fail, and that's where the pollution really becomes a real problem. So sometimes the performance-based will be the best series when you're on the grounds, when it's going into the aquifer straight through the sands. But out in some areas where you're on the flatwoods, where it's going to become a runoff problem, and it's going to run to the closest water body when the system fails, that's what we need to make sure we're inspecting. Thank you.
Big Lambu?
I'm not sure that you need it specified in the comp plan the way it is, but you certainly need something that says that we're going to have performance-based septic systems, or we're going to go to central sewer. Now, most every place you've seen in the country where you have lots of septic tanks, eventually they have to go to central sewer, or you're going to have problems, even with the performance-based. But you certainly need something there. Are we going to get more and more problems?
Ralph Thomas?
Ralph Thomas. I'm confused about one thing. I just heard that there's no septic tank ordinance. This is a study that was done by Florida DEP December 7, 2010. It refers to County Ordinance 2006-58. It says the Wakulla County 2006 ordinance states that only performance-based septic systems that can produce a treatment standard of 10 milligrams per liter nitrogen shall be installed in new construction. I don't know, is that
adopted the comp plan, I believe.
Is that, but that ordinance is no longer in effect?
The septic tank ordinance, and I'm not sure on the exact numbers, I couldn't tell you if that's the correct number or not, but that adopted the comp plan amendment that put the language in the comp plan.
Kind of like if you get your future land use change, there's an ordinance that adopts that. It doesn't specify 10 milligrams per liter. If you read that ordinance, I'm pretty sure it's just going to say we adopt comp plan amendment CP 06-4, whatever.
And regardless if it's ordinance or if it's comp plan, if we're holding a standard of 10 milligrams per liter, from what I understand, 100% of the systems that are installed right now are in violation of that. They can't achieve that result. So once again, we've created a statute that we can't attain. So I guess we ought to go, send Jamie code enforcement out to tell all those people they're in violation when they've, in effect, they've followed the law. They've done exactly what we've hired all the experts and we've listened to testimony. We've created an ordinance that now is, we can't meet. We've got to have clean septic systems that keep the water clean. I understand that. That's not an issue. It's, again, not an issue of for or against harming the environment. I agree with Ron. There's places where we need a septic system when it's appropriate. Let's put the right system in. If you're in the middle of 100 acres and you're nowhere any water and you've got pipe clay and it's not going to, leach into the aquifer quickly, you don't need a $15,000 system. I was glad to hear Chuck Hess say that he might not be opposed to pulling it out of the comp plan, because just a few minutes ago he told us that he'd rather keep the decisions at the local level and the state level. So let's stay on that line of thought and let's try to keep things away from DCA when we can handle it right here locally. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
If nitrogen reduction is the real goal, people put magnitudes of order more nitrogen on the ground with fertilizer than their septic tank.
I always want...
Well,
before let me finish up with the citizens. Is there any other citizens? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. Then we'll hear comment.
I'm Eleanor Elfner, 7 Gulf Breeze Court. I'm not going to get into where you put the ordinance, where you put the policy, but the issue that I think really confounds everything when you're dealing with this is the high cost. And so somebody's been living in a house and their septic system goes, and now they have to come up with $10,000, $12,000 or something. There's very, very few people in the county who can do that. And my feeling is that if I had to come up with my total electric system as soon as something broke down, I wouldn't be able to do that either. So I think what we need to do is work with other people to see about really having a sewer utility so that the money comes in as a base cost first, and then you pay that off over time, just like you pay your electric bill over time. But I just want to put it in the mix now so we don't have to, when we finally get what we want to happen, realize it can't happen because we haven't set up a funding system for people to conform.
Okay, that's all the citizens to be heard. And Jerry, you had some comments, or Lynn?
Well, this is sort of following up to Ms. Elfner's comment. There's a lot of work going on right now to develop a regional maintenance entity and to look at how these systems should be kind of overseen and where the costs are paid, and a utility is the same kind of option, so that instead of people owning their own septic tanks, that it would be like you described, just a payment, and when the repairs needed to be made, the homeowner wouldn't need to pay for it, the utility would come in and do that. So there are a lot of people who are working on that right now, and there are also the studies underway to try and figure out where within the county and within the region, where do we need sewer, where do we need cluster systems, where are individual conventional tanks maybe okay, where are performance-based systems the best option. And what I would like to do is right now, let's just leave the comp plan alone and focus on trying to use these results as they'll be coming forward, and then construct what seems to be the best plan. And if we need to go back at that point and make changes to the comp plan so that it fits, I think that's the timing that would make sense to me, rather than just take it all out now and not really know what we want in there instead.
We, the government, just took a blanket and threw it across the entire county and said that whether you need it or you don't need it, it's in our opinion that you do need it, so you're going to have a performance-based septic tank. I hear a lot of folks tell me as soon as the people who put it in get out of sight that they unplug it because they don't want to pay the cost of whatever. Then Ms. Coley in this session reduced the inspection. We've got systems now that require inspection that we're no longer going to have inspection. So the whole idea of performance-based, there's probably somewhere that you could justify having a performance-based tank. And Randy, I'll ask you, whatever happened to an engineer in the process evaluating what kind of tank you need? Where does that go wrong? When you're building a house and I have to put in a septic tank, somebody decides where is
The county
it?
decided. The county decided you have to put in a performance-based system, and there's no question.
Well,
There's a couple different systems you can use to meet that standard, but you have to meet that standard.
But I would think that we should possibly, instead of the county dictating 100%, that the engineer who is designing the system should determine, well, this is 5 acres. There's no reason for a performance. There's 2 acres. There's no reason. There's a point where there would be. But if the people unplug it and if it's not inspected, why are we having it?
Well, and if we do an ordinance, there's very specific things like mound systems. We could incorporate that into it. Restrictive soils. Pad knows all about this.
Yeah,
But you could say if you meet this criteria, and this criteria, and this criteria, you got to have performance based. And let me back up a second and give full disclosure. I make not a lot of money, but I make a portion of my living doing engineering on these performance-based systems. I'm cutting my own throat by trying to back off on them. I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing to do, and that's why I'm doing the wetlands thing, because I think it's the right thing to do. Not out of any greed. The septic tank thing is anti-greed. I'm going to lose money, period, because I do this for a living.
Well, basically, that's what I'm asking. Instead of throwing this blanket over, I don't know if we do it in every case, but we have an engineer determine what
I want
is
to take
best.
the engineer out of it, with all due respect
Okay,
to myself. I
fine.
want to set the rule. If you meet these criteria, you need one. Go get
Okay.
an engineer. If you don't, you put a regular septic tank in.
Fine
connect with
enough.
the engineer.
I read one of those reports, and I don't know which particular one it was, but it was just as simple as that a fill line, a drain field line that was doubled would do everything that a performance did. You know, we don't necessarily have to have the performance if you have the space for the drain line.
And we need really to keep things in perspective too. Like I said, one bag of fertilizer in your yard is probably going to put out more nitrogen, Pat, help me, than your septic tank is in a long time. It depends on what the soils are below the drain field. There's a lot of factors that it depends on. And
Any more comments from the board?
What do we directed staff to do?
I'll tell you what I'd like
Bring
staff to
an
do.
item
Huh?
back. Well, I mean, you need to come back with an item to, we're not going to vote tonight.
You wanted to come back without an item. The
what?
direction provided to staff will be included in the record of the minutes and will eliminate staff bringing it back an agenda item. Yeah, that's what it said.
I'll tell you what I want to do. I guess we'll just nod yes and nod no. I'd like to do both the things I wanted to do. Take both of the languages out of the comp plan. We can address the wetlands ordinance at a later time. It'll still be in effect. I would like to see some changes, however. I think maybe we could take her idea and see what overlap there is possibly and eliminate the redundancy. You know, I'm not against protecting wetlands. I'm against the redundancy of going to get a permit from them, then come back and go get a permit from them too for the same thing. And I'd like to see, that's number one. Number two, I'd like to see comp plan revised to take the language I've stricken out related to performance-based systems and advanced waste treatment systems taken out and have the county start preparing an ordinance to address those issues. I don't want to lapse, though, in time where this comp plan is not in effect. I don't want a time period where you don't need performance-based systems because there is no rule of government. I guess we can adopt the comp plan. You know, we can change the date of adoption of the comp plan to take effect so that doesn't happen. Yes, that was part of my direction. But we can't really draft it without that study that we're waiting on. So I just wanted to get the ball rolling. Typically a comp plan amendment takes months and months and months. That's my direction.
It doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't anymore. It did. You could only do 2 a year, but now you can do them as often as
We
you want to
can
move.
look at least get some language back for us to look at.
You're too gleeful.
Okay.
That's my.
Does that give you enough guidance?
Well,
Was that, I mean,
I don't.
We can't vote. Miss Arts doesn't want that guidance.
I wouldn't do that with the wetlands at all. I think if you want to have, some discussions with the Wetlands Committee about specific issues related to our ordinance, I would be eager to see what changes maybe need to be made to the ordinance. For the performance-based, what I would do is wait till the study comes in, work on appropriate ordinance, and then make the comp plan changes once you've worked, once that's happened. I don't see a
I
rush
still
to
prefer my
start moving
direction.
with
I
the...
respect your position, though.
Okay, well, we need to see where the others fall.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably at the moment I'm in agreement with Commissioner Arts. I like what you're doing with the septic tank amendments to the comp plan. I think I've agreed to say we should look something like that, try and find a better suitable thing. And I think we can make the changes that you're looking for in the ordinance as needed. I don't think we have to change the comp plan to do what you're trying to accomplish.
In some way, I want to get away from going up to Tallahassee to ask their blessings on what we do.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I really resent having to go to Tallahassee to ask them basically anything. I think we're smart people, and we're elected by the people to do the things of the people, and we should be able to do it without going to Tallahassee.
Okay. So
Mike, where are you?
I'm with Randy and Jerry, so I say let's move on with the what Randy suggested. I've always said that. I've hated the performance-based septic tank rule. Pat knows that. All the people who's ever sat in a meeting with me about it knows that. The infrastructure committee knows that. And I'm fine with moving ahead with those proposals that you made, and let's see where.
And I'm not proposing voiding the wetlands ordinance. I would like to, however, look at it and see what overlap there is. And
okay.
And okay, so that applies to the wetlands ordinance as well.
Yeah. Before we adjourn, I wanted to recognize Tallahassee City Commissioner Nancy Miller. If you just raise your hand there or stand up, please, ma'am. We're glad to have you here. And your husband, I think is next to you there, John Bass. He's director of the stormwater for Tallahassee. We could probably use your help, sir. We're having some stormwater woes down here, but we're working on that. So stick around. We might talk to you about that. But thank y'all for being here.
And please feel free
comments?
to speak.
If not, we're adjourned. Thank y'all.
Oh, wait. Advanced wastewater treatment? AWT? We didn't talk about that.
so it was included in my...
They're going to bring back the changes, and then they'll make an ordinance that overlaps and still provide things.